from their parents to travel, so they were getting turned away to go and get emails from their parents. One guy was shouting out, New Zealand, Australia have closed their borders. So I was quite stressed at that point, obviously thinking what's going to happen. It took a long time to get to the check-in, and then basically they pretty much called out
loan facility of up to $900 million to ensure that the airline can meet its cash flow needs and continue to operate. The loan is in two tranches, an initial facility of up to $600 million, which is effectively available as soon as the Crown has received necessary documentation and legal obligations have been met, and that Air New Zealand's reserve drop below a minimum threshold. The second tranche of $300 million would be made available if needed and on receipt of further business plans. The agreement provides for the loan to be converted into equity upon request from the Crown at reasonable terms to be agreed with the company. It also provides for the Crown to request after 6 months a capital raise to repay the loan if required. It is a commercial loan with repayment set between 7 and 9%. Throughout the process, both Air New Zealand and the Crown have taken independent advice to assess the terms. These terms have been concluded to be reasonable and appropriate. A condition of the agreement is the cancellation of the interim dividend and any future dividends. The agreement includes minimum service provisions, in particular including to fly to key international destinations and safeguarding the domestic network with flights continuing to all current destinations. The Air New Zealand schedule is, of course, under constant review at this time. This option was chosen because it was able to be moved forward at pace to avoid any disorderly situation and to continue to secure an airline for New Zealand. We are obviously in a very fluid situation and an unprecedented situation generally and specifically when it comes to aviation. This agreement allows Air New Zealand to play its part in keeping essential air routes open to facilitate the return of New Zealanders to New Zealand and the flow of cargo. The aviation sector is in turmoil across the world. Every airline is under significant stress, with many struggling to operate in the face of daily changes to borders, restrictions and air routes. This is leading to huge job losses in airlines around the world. The reality is that without the intervention that we have announced today, New Zealand was at risk of not having an airline of national carrier status. That could not happen, and that is why we have moved in the way we have. From our perspective, Air New Zealand has a unique and critical network function, and as the 52% shareholder, we have a responsibility to move in the way that we have. Regrettably, Air New Zealand has advised us, given the global situation, that there is no way to avoid job losses in the environment that they are in. They are working closely with unions on this and indeed with the government. Discussions are underway around redeployment options for Air New Zealand staff, in particular to support the Ministry of Health in its public health response. We look forward to seeing this come to fruition shortly. In addition to this agreement, there are specific discussions underway around Air New Zealand's contribution to the repatriation effort of New Zealanders and to maintaining cargo flights. These would be the subject of separate service agreements in terms of their commercial nature. We are in unprecedented times. No one can be sure what the immediate or medium-term future of the aviation sector is. I am extremely mindful of the uncertainty and anxiety for the staff of Air New Zealand. We will be working closely with the company to ensure we do the very best by those staff. For now, we have ensured that we have a national carrier who can play an important role in this time of crisis. Questions?
How real was the risk that Air New Zealand would shut down, and will this be enough to save it?
The risk was real. It's quite clear that in a company of Air New Zealand's status that they have been in discussions with their banks. It was clear that unless we stepped in, there wasn't this kind of financing facility likely to be available from anywhere else.
How many jobs are predicted to go?
That is an ongoing discussion between Air New Zealand and the unions, and they've been working very closely on that. I think when you look around the rest of the world, you can see that there has been an extreme level of job loss among airlines. We're working hard to make sure that we mitigate that and that we continue to have a good functioning airline that employs a good number of New Zealanders, but we just cannot expect in the turmoil that the aviation sector is in that there won't be job losses, but there is no number today.
New Zealand is estimated to be burning between $200 and $450 million a month. How much time will $900 million really buy it?
Well, that's the negotiation we've had. They obviously have existing reserves. I mean, they're not operating in a zero cash flow environment. They have reserves. This facility is now available for them to draw down upon. As I said before, we are operating in extraordinarily fluid times, and so this is the facility that we could organise quickly. The reason we chose this particular style of financing was because we could do it immediately. As I said, there are provisions in the agreement for us to convert this loan into equity, should that become something that the government desires to do. But for now, this is an amount of money that allows our national carrier to continue operating. Sorry, Tova and then Jenny.
How likely is that Air New Zealand won't be able to pay the loan back?
Well, it has been set up so that they can. Air New Zealand are confident that they can, and that's obviously the basis that we have to work from. Jenny.
There's been some work in the US saying that supporting existing jobs is cheaper than trying to create new ones. Is the government taking any thought to that?
Well, certainly what we want to do is continue to work with Air New Zealand so that they can maintain as many staff as is possible. Air New Zealand is a good business, and it is very important to note that what's happened here has got nothing to do with the way Air New Zealand's board or management were working. This is an external force that has come in and done this. So we will continue to work with them to try to ensure that as many jobs are retained as possible. But as you look around the world at airlines like Qantas, where they're talking about between half and 2/3 of their staff going, we want to make sure we can do as well as we can by the staff of the airline, Benedict.
How quickly do you expect Air New Zealand to be accessing this?
Well, that's up to whether they meet the minimum threshold. I'm not going to comment on what that is today. That's a business matter for Air New Zealand. But the facility is effectively, as I said before, available immediately upon the provision of the business plans and the various regulatory matters that they have to undertake. They will be able to, judge when they reach that point. But in the absence of having made this agreement today, we were at risk of losing our national carrier.
The current share price, at the current share price, $900 million would take New Zealand government's stake in the company up to 68%. That's pretty close to a 70% threshold. Would you guys consider a takeover bid?
What we've done is create the facility to allow Air New Zealand to continue operating. We need to see how things play out over the next few months. We're satisfied that Air New Zealand as a company is well run, well governed. They have a plan to be able to get through this period. Future decisions are for future times.
Is it your preference that in a future cash raise that private shareholders contribute in the proportion that they have, as in that the government shareholding stays or thereabouts where it is?
For now, we are sticking with where we are. But as I say, we are in a very fluid situation, and so this is an agreement that facilitates Air New Zealand's cash flow needs and continuing to operate. I'm not going to make comments today about where I think we'll be in 3, 6, 9 months' time, because nobody can say that.
Do you acknowledge, though, that given this is a convertible loan, that the government could end up owning a very large proportion of Air New Zealand if private shareholders don't put their hands in the
That is theoretically possible by the terms of the loan, but where we are today is a situation where Air New Zealand believe they are in a strong position to be able to continue to move forward. They are a well-governed, well-managed company. We have created this facility to allow them to continue to operate and have cash flow. Where we end up in 3, 6 or 9 months' time, nobody can say for sure, but we do have the facility within the agreement to do the conversion.
This is a bailout of private shareholders because you have effectively given them a bit of a relief on not punitive terms. They could come out of this better than they could if you really played hardball.
Yeah, where we are looking at is the importance for the national interest of New Zealand of being able to act swiftly and decisively to continue our national carrier operating. We've clearly borne in mind the position that Air New Zealand was in going into this and the position we hope Air New Zealand will be coming out of this situation. The criteria we applied was very much about what we could do to ensure our airline continued operating. The future arrangements are ones that we will deal with as time comes. Yep, Joe.
Talk through any of the details around these international destinations. Obviously, Winston Peters spoke this morning about trying to get people who are stranded to points and Air New Zealand helping with that. Can you give us anything there?
Yeah, so what we want to do is continue to ensure that key international destinations are dealt with. So there we're talking, and bear in mind Air New Zealand there's two different things probably to talk about here, Joe. Air New Zealand has a series of existing routes that what we're talking about that we want it to continue to fly. So this is fluid, but that includes destinations like Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong, North America. Beyond that, there is a second set of discussions underway about what I guess you would call repatriation flights to other destinations. That's a piece of work that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade is leading. You can imagine that's a very large exercise. Most New Zealanders are actually finding their way back to New Zealand, but there will be examples of other situations. Air New Zealand is one potential organisation that can support that, but there actually are a lot of other airlines and a lot of other ways that might be able to be dealt with as well. So those two separate things going on there.
How quickly is that work being done? Like when can those Kiwis that can't make it home, when will they be able to access
So
those
this is, I think, the largest consular exercise that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade has ever had to undertake. I'm aware that they're working on it right now. I don't have a particular piece of information about that, but Air New Zealand have said that they are ready and willing to assist with that. That is separate from this agreement in the sense that that would be a contract for service.
But there are people stuck in places like...
We could be whisking Kiwis home in as little as a week.
Look, there are matters that Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Air New Zealand can talk to you about, but clearly there is a need at the moment around repatriation. As I say, most New Zealanders are getting on flights, coming home. There are some people who may have some difficulties with that. That's the work that MFAT's doing now, and in the end you'll need to go through MFAT to talk about exactly the details of that.
We do know that like some of those places, like Peru, for example, there are people stuck there, so it wouldn't be sort of out of the realm of possibility for Air New Zealand to go to some of these sorts of places to collect people.
So there are the discussions that are underway, but it's not just with Air New Zealand, I hasten to add, because it may be more efficient to use another carrier or use another means of getting people from where they are to somewhere where perhaps they could join up with an Air New Zealand flight. So it doesn't necessarily mean you charter a plane to go to a place. It's about a network of movements to enable people to get back. I just encourage you for the details of that to talk to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, because obviously it's moving very fast. What we've done today is secure Air New Zealand so it's in a position to contribute to that effort. Beg your pardon?
7 to 9%.
So, as I said at the beginning, we all took advice, both ourselves as the government and Air New Zealand, and the advice that we received was those were reasonable and appropriate in the current environment that we're working in. Clearly, Air New Zealand want to continue to operate as a commercial entity. They understood that a loan would have an interest rate attached to it because that's the structure of the business that they have, and it's regarded by the advisors we had on both sides as reasonable and appropriate.
Were there any discussions about compensation for senior leadership or executives? Was there any discussions around salaries for executives?
Not particularly. I think you'll be able to put questions to Air New Zealand about that. They've already begun, I believe, some discussions around those issues, but you should put those to them.
Is this for Air New Zealand, or you said it was basically unacceptable for them not to be a national carrier? So could we be here in 2 months' time loaning them more money?
Like I said before, this is such a fluid situation in terms of the aviation sector in particular. Air New Zealand have confidence that this deal will enable them to get through this situation. As the Minister of Finance and as a member of the government, I think it's vitally important we have a national carrier. As part of the agreement, we have secured our domestic network and that Air New Zealand will fly to key international destinations. That deals with the immediate and the here and now. We now have to have trust and confidence in the Air New Zealand board and management to go forward from here. Making predictions, as I think you're all aware at the moment, about what's going to happen in 3, 6 or 9 months' time is very hard, let alone what might happen in a week's time.
Talking about the deal load, did you look ahead to, further worst case scenarios? Because, for instance, if we get community spread here and people are told, well, shouldn't fly anywhere, including inside the country, which would then obviously have an even bigger impact on Air New Zealand in terms of its domestic network.
As I say, we're moving to secure the situation as it stands now, but this is very, very fluid. We have agreements around minimum route coverage, both domestically and internationally. That stands, and that's part of the agreement. But clearly, we're going to be in very regular discussion with Air New Zealand from here on.
They must have, in saying that they think that this is enough, they must have given you some sort of indication about the right sizing that they're doing. What have they said about what they're pulling back to?
Well, look, they have, in fact, it's not just me. I mean, Greg Foran's been in the media quite clearly talking about the kinds of changes that he thinks might be necessary. What we wanted to do was ensure that there is an airline. I mean, the other option in terms of job losses is that there's no airline, and you know what the consequence of that would be. So we will continue to work with them on that. But again, if you look around the world at everything from British Airways to Qantas to Japan Air, they are talking about very, very significant job losses because the aviation industry is now in a situation it has never seen before. What we've done today is secure the future of our national airline. We will continue to work with them.
Are you working on similar deals with any other New Zealand companies at the moment?
Obviously, Air New Zealand exists in a very unique set of circumstances. It's network critical, and we're the 52% shareholder of it. So it stands apart from virtually any other organisation. What I have done, I think I said it when I was making the announcements on Tuesday, is we are taking a look at what are the large and network important organisations and businesses within New Zealand and making sure that we're clear that they are secure. I haven't got an active piece of work on any individual one at this time, but we are making sure that we're thinking about that as we go into such a high period of uncertainty.
Can you give us how detailed are the conversations with Air New Zealand that you're aware of about the response to get people out?
Oh, very. So they've been actively engaged with MFAT around that. It is fast-moving situation. As I say, you'll all know people who are on their way home, and people are able to book flights and they are able to come back, but there clearly are some people who are in situations where they're struggling to do that. That's the work that MFAT's doing. Air New Zealand is now in a position to play a part in that. The other bit that I just should emphasise is we've also got discussions going on about the securing of cargo services. That is not just an Air New Zealand issue, that's also other airlines as well. But again, Air New Zealand is now in a position to play its part. Discussions on that are well advanced. Also discussions around redeployment, and in particular, redeployment of staff to support the public health effort.
Will you be, if there are Mercy flights, you will be paying Air New Zealand?
That's correct. It will be a contract for services. This agreement is about securing the airline, securing those key international destinations and securing our domestic network. Beyond that, it becomes a contract for service matter.
Those key international destinations, are you imagining that there'd still be weekly flights or more frequent?
So obviously the schedule is fluid, and at the moment, we are looking at frequency around the level that you're suggesting. But we continue to monitor that. Air New Zealand is operationally responsible for that, but keeping those destinations open and going is a minimum requirement.
Sydney to Auckland or Sydney?
As well. Best to talk to Air New Zealand about the detail of that, but it would be to ensure that those links from New Zealand to those destinations continue.
How real is the risk that the airline still fails even with this loan? Can you give Air New Zealand an assurance that you will not let it fail?
We need a national carrier in a time like this, and we need a national carrier generally in the future, in my view. What we have today is a company that actually was well run and well governed, that has had an amazing outside event occur to it. They have the confidence that they can move through this. We have given them this loan facility to support that. But as I said, I am repeating myself, this is a situation we have never seen before, and we have to continue to keep updating it. But my view remains we must have a national carrier. It's a critical network. I mean, for example, just regardless of whether you're talking about people moving around the country, we know we need to move goods around critical supplies like pharmaceuticals, making sure health professionals can move from one place to another. If we in the event we do end up in a community outbreak situation, how we make sure that we get the right people and the right supplies to the right place. Air New Zealand will have a role to play in that. So we have to make sure that we are supporting that national carrier. When we look to what's the future of the tourism sector or what's the future of the aviation sector, that's not something anyone can decide right now.
Necessary had the government not shut the border or put those self-isolation protocols
Oh,
in place?
look, our actions relative to what's happening in the rest of the world are just, we're doing what we need to do to protect New Zealanders, but you will look at every other airline in the world and you will see the impact it's having. So, no, it's actually just about the overall state of the industry.
How would that redeployment or possible redeployment of Air New Zealand staff to the health sector work, given that they're maybe not trained medical?
Well, it's interesting because actually among the Air New Zealand staff, particularly among the cabin crew, you've got a number of people with medical and health qualifications because actually it's part of their training. So actually there is already a workforce there that's potentially either got some skills or skills that could be upgraded, particularly when it comes to the really essential issue of contact tracing. Actually, the Air New Zealand call centre's already been involved in that. You'll recall in the first couple of cases we had people who had flown on Air New Zealand. Actually, the people who did that follow-up were the Air New Zealand contact centre staff. So actually there is, I think, a decent amount of scope to see those people redeployed. The Ministry of Health and Air New Zealand have already been discussing that along with the unions. And really, we're just urging Air New Zealand and the unions to continue to keep working together. We know they will. They actually have good relationships, and that'll be an important part of making sure that as many of the workforce as possible can continue.
But still related to Air New Zealand, the last couple of flights that we took today and yesterday, all the passengers have been clustered together and there have been empty rows. Would you like to see Air New Zealand practising better social distancing?
I think all organisations need to practice social distancing. I'm not aware of the specifics of that, but obviously, that's something New Zealand should be thinking about.
Do you have any concerns about the functioning of the bank credit markets?
Yeah, I've seen the actions that the Reserve Bank's undertaken this morning. These are the powers that they have. They're moving swiftly to be able to support the markets. For now, the advice I have is that they are functioning well, and what the Reserve Bank has done is provide some security that will continue to be the case.
Government can do.
In terms of the financial markets, that is the responsibility of the Reserve Bank, but we continue to coordinate our actions with them.
Government can do to ensure that there's hand sanitizer at airports as well, given that that's a kind of,
Yeah.
We've got arrivals coming in, it seems like...
Airports are obviously, in general, either private companies or partially owned companies. Everybody should be taking whatever responsibilities that they can to ensure public health. Sorry, I'm going to have to go.
In the first instance, we will want to move quickly if we see any evidence of a community outbreak to implement other measures, and that will